Hey guys, this is David with Apogee Industries out of Venice, Florida. Today I'm going to show you how to do a 2,000-pound trailer bearing service. You could get this done for less than $140. All you need is just a $40 kit for bearings and a grease, and then for under $100 you could get all the tools at Harbor Freight Tools if you don't have them already. If most people at home have this stuff in their garage just laying around. So what we're going to use is a impact, dikes, pliers, and a hammer, and a race puncher, hubcap tool to install them, and a torque wrench. Out here we have a 2,000-pound bearing kit, which is an 1/16" diameter. There is also an option for a 1-inch diameter, so before you buy these things you want to make sure you double check that. If you got a 1-inch shaft or an 1/16", it's going to require different seals, so the minute you type in online that a 1-inch bearing or a 1/1/16", it will automatically come with all the proper races and it'll come with the proper seals. Now the hubcaps we're going to use today is going to be a standard solid hubcap that has no hole in it. This trailer does not have a grease zerd on it. Other trailers do, a lot of boat trailers do, and newer trailers do. So you would use a cap like this. The original caps come with a cheap rubber plug in it. This one that we're going to install is going to be a $2 Apogee lube plug, which will last you over a year. This regular one will last you probably under 2 months, and it'll start cracking and spitting grease out of there. So there you go. We're going to go ahead and get to this job and show you how it's done. If you guys didn't know, we are located in Venice, Florida. We're a local trailer place out here. We service Sarasota all the way up to Fort Myers and Bradenton and Palmetto. So we're a local trailer shop. You can come here and get your yearly services done. Anything that happens with the trailer, we're here to help you guys out. The first step you want to do when you're doing a bearing service is you're going to have to take your wheel off. So what we like to do is we use a impact wrench. If you don't have that, then you could go ahead and use a regular wrench at home. Before you jack it up, just kind of loosen them all up, then jack up the tire and unscrew them by hand. So what we're doing here now is we're going to go ahead and taking the cap off. When we take the cap off, we're going to grab a piece of paper towel to clean all the old grease off of there to locate the cotter pin or the castle nut. Once we locate the cotter pin, we're able to go ahead and pull it out with some dikes or snaps, snips, and this way we can go ahead and unscrew the nut freely. Sometimes you have to use some pliers on this. In this case, this nut's going to come off freely on its own. Sometimes there's some cross-threaded threads on there from previous repairs, or maybe this hub was lost before due to overheat or due to lack of maintenance, so sometimes they don't come off that easy. In this case it did good. So now we're going to go ahead and wipe off all the old grease off of there, clean it up with some brake cleaner, so this way we can go ahead and apply some new grease and get it ready to get installed. Go ahead and apply the new grease on, spread it all out, make sure you get those threads. Those threads are important to be greased, this way the nut can come on freely and not cross thread or anything. We're going to use a specialty tool to remove the seal. You can always use a flat screwdriver to pull it out, or you could just flip over the hub and punch on the bearing, and that will push out the actual seal, but make sure you're not saving those bearings if you're doing it that way. Get all the old grease out of there as much as we can. We don't want to transfer all that over to the solvent tank, so what we do is we go ahead and pull it all out with the finger, make sure it's as little as possible grease in there, and then go ahead and clean it in your solvent tank. You could use some diesel fluid with a brush at home if you don't have a solvent tank, and that will do the same job as the solvent tank will. Once that is done, we're going to go ahead and punch the races out. Make sure both the races are out from both ends, and go ahead and clean out the hub so there's no extra dirt left in there. It's always a good idea to inspect the hub and make sure there is no cracks on the hub. That does happen sometimes, either when punching out the races or maybe there was a crack in there before. If you see a crack, you gotta go and buy a new hub. That's a must. Our tools that we have them specially made already by a machine shop. You probably can't find these online. I've looked, I couldn't find them. The only thing close that I could find was tools at Harbor Freight Tools, race drivers, but they were off all the time, so it made it kind of difficult to install them. What we would do before is we'd kind of grind this stuff off a little bit so it smoothly goes in the actual hub, and you can use this old race as a tool. Just turn it over upside down or the other side up and just slightly punch in the actual race inside, and sooner or later you'll get it in there, no problem. All right, if you're going to use the old existing race to install the new race, we're going to show you how we're going to grind it down in order to install that race without this special tool. This is the grinded down race. Now it's going to go in freely. We probably took out about a 1/16 inch altogether, and now it's going to go in freely into the actual hub, to where you can actually then, if you see that just fell in there, it's going to be a little bit of a challenge to take it out, but it's all doable. You could just flip it over, hit it, and it comes right out. So we're gonna actually use the actual tool that we do, but this is just showing you guys it is possible to use this old race, flip it over, punch it in. You might need to use a little piece of metal in here to stick it in there so you can punch on it, but it's all doable right at home without the specialty tools. Okay, so I'm going to show you guys how we do it at the shop. We have a special spindle that we use. It's just a brand new spindle off an axle trailer. If you don't have a grease zerk, this is what you're going to do. Either you're going to pack it by hand. There are specialty tools that you can buy at O'Reilly's, anywhere, probably Harbor Freight as well, and you can pre-pack them that way. It looks like this. This is going to be the tool that it looks like. Or if you have none of this and you don't want to go buy this, you can pre-pack them at home just by hand, by putting grease on your hand and filling it up with grease. And I'm going to show you how that's done right now. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to go with a wider end on the bottom, and we're going to start slowly packing this thing in. Try not to get grease on the other side of the bearing, and I'm going to show you how it's going to start coming out. You could do this on the side of the road, you could do this at home with no special tools, and you'll have a pre-packed grease, but you got to make sure you do this going circles and circles and circles until you see it coming out on every single side. So as you can see, now we got grease pushing out of the actual bearing. That means that's already packed, and then we just move it over a little bit and we start doing the same thing over and over until we go all the way 360 and have grease coming out of the bearing from every single slot. At the shop, we're going to go ahead and do it with our actual specialty tools. So all the grease that I put on my hand, I'm just going to shove it inside of here right now so we don't waste it. And this way the bearing goes on the grease. Anytime you install a bearing, you always want to put some grease inside of there. This way you don't put a bearing directly to steel. And then if you forget to grease it, if you have a grease zerk, you're not tightening this thing down with no grease. At least you got some grease in there to make sure you don't damage the bearing. What we do is we put a piece of plier on there, vice grip, and this way we just hold the bearing. So when we're greasing it, grease is going to, of course, come out from the top here and is going to push the bearing off. So that doesn't happen. We just use a vice grip. Again, this is not on the actual trailer. This is just on a vice grip, holding it with a vice grip. All right, so this is a little bit excessive grease, but again, we wanted you guys to see it on the video, how it comes out. So the whole hub is now pre-packed, ready to rock and roll. Go back on the trailer. This trailer is not going to have an issue for at least a year, probably a little bit more than that. Since this is one of our customers that we service regularly, we're going to be calling them back in a year and letting them know, hey, your bearing service is due. I did want to mention one more thing. Whenever you're doing bearing services, especially on a boat trailer that comes in salt water, don't try to save a penny on those bearings and try to use your old bearings. Your old bearings are always going to have some grooves on them. We've never had luck with using old bearings. We always do new bearings only for only $30 for a bearing kit. It makes so much more sense to just do it and forget about it than put new grease, do all that work, and then 2 months later you lose a bearing because it had some scuffs that you didn't notice on it. So always keep that in mind. Never try to save that $30 per wheel and then have an issue in 2 months later. This trailer looks like it does have an option. No, it does not have an option for grease dirt. Some trailers, if it's a customer that comes in for a fleet and there's an option for grease dirt, we'll install that grease dirt and then we'll put the other cap on, and this way it can get greased every couple months. Some new fresh grease in there so it can stay updated. After everything's clean, we're going to go ahead and install that hub, and then we're going to show you guys how to properly tighten the nut. And out of our experience for 4.5 years being out here in business, knock on wood, we've had 0 comebacks for all these years for bearings. Washer. So we're going to go ahead and install the washer, install the nut. Always make sure there's a little bit of grease on the actual thread. So when we do that, you always want to put a little bit of grease on the thread. This way you don't screw up the thread. Makes it a lot smoother to go in. And we're going to tighten this hub down with our hands, with the pliers. You don't even need a socket for this. Every single hub is able to do with the pliers. We're going to tighten it up a little bit hard, preset the bearing, spin it. Do that 3 times. On the 4th time, we're going to tighten it, not spin the hub, undo the nut, and then match it with your cotter pin. So you're supposed to be able to put that nut on by hand without using the pliers. You're allowed to do just a little bit with the pliers if you need to go up a little bit, if it doesn't make sense to go back. When we tighten this up, you want to make sure it plays really, really easy. So as you can see, it's got the play in there, no problem. It's okay to go slightly tighter if you got to go less than an 1/8 inch tighter to get the cotter pin in. You do not want to go a 1/4 inch back to put the cotter pin in. So it'd rather be slightly tighter than it is loose, because the minute these bearings start wearing out, they're going to loosen up on their own. But make sure it's not tight to where you're going to overheat your bearing. So the reason it's got to spin freely is you want to make sure this bearing is not over tightened, and this way you don't overheat the bearing. So we use this tool again. This is the tool we use for the hubcaps. You can always use a 2x4. All you got to do, because when you do a new job, you don't want it to look all messy and dinged up. So you use a 2x4, you put it up to the actual hubcap, and then you just pound on it evenly and watch that thing go in all the way flush. Another thing you want to do is you always want to, especially if you're doing this for a customer, you always want to clean up all the grease that's left on there. Customers don't get happy when they come in, they do a service of $350 or so at the shop, and then they leave the place and you got grease splattering on the tires. They don't like that. They think something got done right, and then they come back and complain. And so just make sure everything's always nice and clean to where you got no grease spitting out. Last step that we do is we always torque these tires to a certain spec. Any 5 lug is going to be at 95 foot-pounds. If you don't have a torque wrench, you can always go run over to Harbor Freight, pick one up. They got some cheap ones out there that are not digital like this. They're just a mechanical torque wrench. Or you could probably stop at your local tire shop, tighten these up to where you think they're safe, make it 5 miles to your local tire shop, and they'll probably do it a lot of times for free, or they might charge you 10 bucks to torque your wheels at the 95 foot-pounds torque specs. So any trailer that leaves this place and we took the tire off, every single trailer gets torqued. It is very important. We've seen a lot of trailers come in here with destroyed wheels, destroyed studs, just a big mess that happens if you don't torque these properly. Problems happen. So we're going to go ahead and torque these down to 95 foot-pounds. And our torque wrench is somewhat fancy. It will buzz when it's actually at the proper specs. Trailers do want to move on you, especially the light ones. So chalking the wheels is a good idea. We always start from the top and just go in a circle. This way we made sure we did all of them. When we tighten them up, we'll go ahead and do them cross stars or whatever, and then when you actually torque them, just go ahead and do them in circle. This way you know you got every single one of them.